All right, all right, all right. Here we are live. Marco Montemagno, founder of Super Summit, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. We have the beginning of SME's Mobile Strategies 2014, powered by Apps Builder, the fabulous guys at Apps Builder. And today is the first session, which is unbelievable. We have 1 week full of great speakers talking about mobile strategies, and I'm really interested to learn. You know, I'm an entrepreneur like most of you guys, or you work in the digital business, and or you are a SME, and so we have the same kind of question in our mind: how can we improve our mobile strategy? And our first great guest today here to help us today is Michael Mace from UserTesting.com. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Glad to be with you.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So, Mike, I have to say immediately, I'm a great fan for UserTesting.com. So that's the.
Thank you.
I will try not to be, so let's say not really independent. So I'll try to give you also some question to make it a little bit more difficult. But the reality is that I've been trying user testing, and I always really appreciated the kind of job you do and all the data that you have about users, how they test, and the way you develop the service. I really like it. So that's the first thing I have to say. Now I will only ask difficult questions.
Okay.
So, Mike, tell me one thing. First of all, where are you based?
We're in Mountain View, California, so right in the middle of Silicon Valley.
All right, very good. And give us in 20 seconds just an idea of usertesting.com for people that maybe are not familiar with user testing as a company and the service that you provide.
Yep. So think of us as the quickest, easiest way to get feedback from users on a website, a mobile website, or an application. So we have a big panel of users. You come to our site, you can define what you want tested, like I want you to try this, or I want you to do these tests or answer these questions. We send that out to our testers. You get video back of them using it, so you see the screen, you hear them talking about it, you find out exactly how they respond to your stuff, and we can turn it around very, very quickly. It usually takes a few minutes to set up a test, and then we can usually return results within a few hours. So you can set up a test in the morning, and by the afternoon you're looking at video of people using your stuff.
Great. And I mean, a lot of people. The first time I've been using user testing, probably you were, I don't know, 20 people working at user testing. Now you are growing. I don't know if it's public data, but I mean, you really a lot of people working there now.
Yeah, we're up actually over 100 employees, so I'm allowed to say that.
Fantastic. All right, Mike. So I would like just go straight to your presentation. So if you can try to share slides, well, would be great. In the meantime, I will just get these 20 seconds while you set up to give a little bit of news and schedule for this week. So today we have this first session, and then basically every day, check the calendar on supersummit.com. Just check the calendar and you'll see all the speakers, appointments, and sessions that we have in plan. A lot, and also check your email. We have every day going out some reminders and few useful data, so just have a look at your email. All right, I see you ready. Mike, I'll let you go, and I will just interrupt you when there are some good, interesting questions from the chat. And obviously, guys, just whenever you have a question or some idea, suggestion, here is the chat for us, and I shut up now and I'll let you talk, Mike.
Great, thanks very much. Well, we call this presentation 4 traps because it talks about the most common problems that companies run into when they're moving into mobile, whether it's doing mobile app development or doing mobile website development. And these are based on the tests that we've done at User Testing. I guess in order to kind of explain how this all worked, I should give you a little bit of background on the company. Actually, we already talked about it a little bit, but let me kind of give a little bit of context. So I joined the company about a year ago, and I'm what we call the mobile strategist, which means I'm the lead guy working on the mobile market. And one of the first things that I did when I came into the company was I looked through the archive that we had of mobile tests, and it was literally thousands of tests that I went through. And you know, I didn't watch every single video because there wasn't time, but I tried to pick out the ones that were the most indicative of problems that companies were having. And what we saw was that there were some repeating patterns. of places where a lot of companies were getting stuck in mobile, kind of repeated mistakes that everybody was making. And so this presentation is derived from all of those tests. It's kind of the highlights that we've seen across all the tests that we've done. Now, in addition to looking at that stuff, this is also kind of filtered by my own background. So I should mention that a little bit just so you understand where I'm coming from. I spent about 10 years at Apple in a variety of roles, including head of worldwide customer and competitive analysis, which was the main market research arm at Apple. So I'm not trying to pretend like I'm a professional market researcher, but I've been working with market research related stuff throughout my career. I also spent a bunch of time at Palm in a variety of strategy and product planning roles. And so out of that, I got a very early exposure to mobile. I've been working in mobile since before the smartphone world. So what you're getting is a combination here of what we saw in the research and also my own interpretation of it based on my background. So there's a lot of opinion here, but it is based on real tests that we did. So in the tradition of doing a presentation, what you're always supposed to do is first tell people what you're going to say and then say it and then repeat it again at the end. So in that spirit, here's what I'm going to talk about. The first thing is that new computing paradigms, new ways of using computing technology, and mobile is definitely a new paradigm, usually cripple the current leaders because they change the way the world operates and people don't realize what's changed. And we definitely see that going on in mobile. Second, there are these 4 mobile traps that I'm going to talk about specifically. And then finally, if you're going to be successful in mobile, you have to have a separate new sense of reflexes around what you do in development and how you make decisions about your products. And I'll talk about what those different reflexes are. And then finally, at the end, I'll have 10 steps that you can take in order to be successful. So here's my agenda. I'm going to talk about why those transitions are dangerous, then the 4 traps, and then how to avoid the traps. So first of all, I don't know if you'll recognize this. I do this presentation a fair amount, and about half the time somebody spots this and they say, oh yeah, I know what that is. So this is Lotus 123. It was in the old pre-Windows, pre-Macintosh world the most powerful and most important piece of personal computing software. It's hard for folks today to even understand how important Lotus was. If you took Google and Facebook and combined them together and threw in a couple of companies like Adobe, you'd start to get an idea of how important they were. So they had by far the most engineers, the most money, the most momentum, the biggest user base. And yet, when we switched to graphical user interfaces, they did not manage to keep their position in the marketplace. The company eventually fell apart. And this was not just an isolated incident. In fact, if you look at the history of the computer industry, usually when we get one of those changes in platform, one of those paradigm changes, it ends up invalidating the existing software. So, if you look at the leaders in MS-DOS software, WordPerfect, Lotus 123, and DBase, none of them managed to have equivalent success when we got into the Windows and Macintosh world. You jump forward 10 years and you look at the leaders in the Windows desktop software world, and then you look at the people who ended up being the leaders in the web applications world, and it's a completely different set of companies. It's not like the existing companies like Autodesk and Adobe were destroyed, but they don't have nearly the sort of power in this new world of the web as they had in the old world of desktop software.
Yeah.
So now we're moving.
And by the way, Mike, sorry to interrupt you, but the
okay.
news from yesterday was the Microsoft. They've been fired thousands of people, and so everyone. So wow, that's amazing. How they were so huge until a few years ago, and now everything is changing. Yeah.
Well, and tied in with Microsoft is the story of what happened to Nokia, which I know a lot of people in Europe feel very, very deeply, and how they. We're so successful in the mobile phone market, but then we had this transition to smartphones, and they were just not able to cope with that transition. So it's a really sad process. It's really scary, and now we're moving fully into mobile. And in terms of mobile applications, it's still very early. I don't think we know yet which software companies are going to be most successful in mobile, but you're seeing Microsoft being deeply challenged. If you look at the category of mobile software, which is the most developed, it's probably games, and the companies that are most successful in mobile games are not the existing PC gaming companies. They're new mobile startups that are coming in and are doing new innovative things for mobile. So is this going to be a complete extinction event just like the previous transitions? It's not clear yet, but it's starting to look like it might be. So if you're working in the tech industry, then an important question that you want to ask is, why does this happen, and what can I do to avoid being one of those dinosaurs? Well, The reason that we see these extinction events is because three big challenges happen all at the same time when you have a transition. The first one is that the users reconsider their commitments. So if you go from an old Windows computer to a new Windows computer, chances are very high that you're going to just replace the same software apps. You'll go out and get Microsoft Office or whatever it is that you used before, and you'll just put it on the new computer. But when people get a different type of computer, what they tend to do is they stop and reconsider those software allegiances. So chances are when you got your first smartphone, you probably did not go into the App Store and look for Microsoft Office. Instead, you went and looked for, gee, what sort of interesting apps can I put on this thing? Let me try some new stuff. So your existing loyalty to a certain application was kind of broken by changing device type. And software companies usually don't realize that's going to happen until it's too late. The second thing that happens is that the rules of good product design change. And I saw that. I was in the industry, and I've been in the industry long enough that I saw what happened to Lotus when they tried to move into the graphical interface world. And they thought it was going to be pretty straightforward. We've got all these keystroke commands that we use on the personal computer. Let's just translate those across. We'll make them into menus on Windows. And gee, this is pretty easy. We should be just fine. What they didn't realize was that they actually needed to redesign the entire structure of the application. They got surpassed by people who treated things differently. The third thing that happens is that usually the companies that are the leaders convince themselves that it's not that critical a change until it's too late for them to act. And by the time they realize that the size of the problem, it's actually not possible for them to recover. So this combination of your users are going to become disloyal, the rules of good product design change, and you will probably underestimate the challenge. That's why repeatedly we see these companies ending up in these very serious situations. So having talked about that and kind of gotten your general attention, let's jump specifically into what's happening in mobile and where are people tending to get caught by these issues. So
Mike, just one curiosity before you keep going. You worked in Apple.
Yes.
And Steve Jobs, he was still there, I would say.
I was there almost the entire time that Steve was not, actually, so we didn't overlap that much, but please go ahead with your question.
All right. Because I was curious if the company, how the company understood that kind of transition, because then they came out, with the iPhone and all the app war, basically inventing it. So I was curious to understand how could they, spot this kind of big changing before the others, and so that was just a curiosity.
No, it's a really good question, and I'll give you a short answer because the long answer we can do in a whole hour on it if you want to schedule it sometime. But the short answer is two things went on. One was Steve Jobs was just a very, very smart man, and he understood that this was an opportunity to do something different. But the other thing that was really important is the thing that people don't understand about Apple is they'll say either, oh, Apple is a hardware company, or they'll say, no, Apple is a user interface company, or Apple is a software company. Apple is a computer systems company. What it does best is combining together hardware and software and all these other things. And Apple has had experience at running these sorts of platform transitions in the past where you change the hardware and the software together. If you think about it, Microsoft never did that. They were only software. Companies like IBM, IBM was only hardware when they did the PC. So Apple understood the idea of, gee, I could change the phone hardware and the phone software at the same time to create a very different experience for the users. And they did that more thoroughly than anybody else could. So it was really a result of both Jobs' brilliance, but also of the way that the company does business and the way it looks at computing, where it doesn't just do software or hardware.
Got it.
So anyway, the first of the four traps that we see is what we call legacy. So this is a situation where companies have an existing business. Usually it's on the web, although sometimes it's a PC applications company. And they just try to move it across to mobile, or as an engineer would say, they try to just port it. So in a lot of cases, what you'll see is that usage flow within the application will be driven by the computer version. So, the way that you do things on the computer, whether it's a desktop application or a desktop website, ends up just being crammed into mobile. There will either be too many features or too few features, and this is a really tough one because you can't win. If you try, when you're trying to shrink down to a smartphone, you'll say, okay, let's take out some features, and then a lot of your power users get really upset. Or if you try to cram in all the features, then your smartphone application or website ends up looking way too complex. And as a result, regular users can't use it. So there's actually this very difficult trade-off that you need to make around prioritizing features. And we see a lot of companies that just really fumble that prioritization. Or we see broken things where companies just don't realize that something doesn't work properly on mobile, and they're not doing enough testing to really understand that that's happening. So one example I'd like to give you is this is a real-world example from one of our clients. We have permission to show this to you. We've made it anonymous. But this is a company that does videos online. So they sell access to instructional videos online. And they've got a series of subscription plans where it's a monthly subscription, monthly premium, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the image that you see here is just a little screen capture that I took of a part of their PC website. So this is now on a personal computer, not on a mobile device. And if you notice, you've got that little pop-up that's bounded in yellow, which says, here's what an affordable premium plan is. So they're using tooltips, like we all do on the desktop web.
Right.
You can hover over something to get more information. There's also a little link that says compare plans, and if you click on that, you get this beautiful checkmark box like everybody does on the web with all these comparisons. You can understand exactly what's going on. Well, when these guys went to mobile, this is just this is a frame from the mobile test that they did. So if we were able to run video on Google Hangouts, I'd show you the video with the user actually trying it. But anyway, here's a still frame. So they took that same subscription page from their checkout process and they just duplicated it on the mobile device. But if you look closely, it just says monthly and monthly premium. There is no pop-up that you can do that has the checkmark items because that was written in Flash on their website. You don't have Flash in mobile. You can't hover over anything to get a tooltip because there is no hovering in mobile. There's no way to do it.
Right.
So they took people who previously had this beautifully fine-tuned purchasing process, and they just, well, let's take out those pieces because they don't, they don't work that well in mobile. Hey, we're done. This will work great. And what happened is when we actually did the user test for them, the users got completely stuck because they got to this point and they say, why should I pay $37 instead of $25? There's no explanation here at all. And they actually got very angry about it. And it's really scary for a company like this because if you're trying to get people into the purchasing funnel, the last place you want customers to get upset is when they're about to buy your stuff. And yet that's exactly what ended up happening. And this company wasn't even aware that it was going on. So,
Mike, just to clarify, when people use user testing, the amazing thing that I experienced on my skin is that you have real testers, real people describing, talking about your app or about your website when they are in front and using it, and often they are very straight. So in the beginning, yes, I heard, comments that I thought, gosh, how is it possible? It's talking like that about my website. That is so unbelievable because you have real comments and critics from people using it in that specific moment. So that's why I think it's a very powerful way of testing, and you immediately spot flow in your app or in your website.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, it's the way that tests feel when you're watching the videos is kind of like you're standing behind the user looking over their shoulder. And what happens is they get rewarded if you as a client praise them for doing a good test. So they are trying to they have an incentive to try to make these tests as useful as possible for you. They are normal users. They're not like professional usability testers. If you want a consultant to do usability consulting, that's a different thing. This is real people responding to you. But they're people who have an incentive to be very, very frank and honest with you about what they're seeing. So anyway, what do you do with this situation where you're trying to move stuff across into the mobile world? Well, the first thing is you can't just port your stuff across. You have to rethink it. So you've got to spend some time learning the mobile paradigm. How does the mobile world operate? The best practice that we see in development companies is they set up entirely separate development teams for each of the mobile platforms. So if you look at Evernote, for instance, they have a Windows mobile team, and they have an Android team, and they have an iPhone team. And those people are just immersed in those particular platforms. They know how the users think. They know how their interface works. Now, a lot of companies don't have the money, unfortunately, to set up those separate teams. At a minimum, you need to hire a product manager who is just dedicated to mobile and then can nag everyone else about the things that they need to do in order to be successful in mobile. And even then, it still is a really difficult thing to do. But at a minimum, you've got to have a dedicated person on that. Second, you want to think through what you're doing from how you actually do it. And this is very challenging because a lot of companies, they just kind of assume that the way that they do things is the essence of their products. So look at what Microsoft did in smartphones for years and years and years. They tried to take the usage paradigm of Windows, the start menu, the icons, all of that other stuff, and find some way to cram it into a mobile device. And they tried over and over and over again, but they didn't really start to get traction until they went back and said, let's throw out all of that stuff and we'll do a completely new design. And so it's gotten a lot better. They're actually a lot better now. Their products are a lot more credible. But it took so long that Apple and Google had already seized the lead. And so it may well have been too late for them to make that change. You want to break down your application or your website and think about what are all the functions that we do and what are the ones that are most important in mobile, and maybe we want to make a series of separate applications. Maybe it's a series of rifle shots instead of a shotgun. And you can watch some companies like Facebook who are experimenting back and forth with those sorts of questions. And then finally, this is a piece of advice that goes back to when I was working at Palm, is we always encouraged people to focus on the mainstream 80% of their customers. Your noisiest customers, the ones who complain the most, will be the top 20% who are the power users. But in mobile, because your resources are so constrained, if you design for those people, you'll end up making your product too complicated for the average person to be able to use it. What you want to do is actually design for the average person and then figure out some ways to satisfy those power users. Maybe you add in the extra features that they want, but you hide them a couple levels down underneath a couple of screens. Hey, they're power users. They'll find this stuff if you give them some way to do it. But don't design the center of your application or website to be just built for those power users, because you'll actually end up excluding the average customer. So that's the legacy issues. Let's talk a little bit about the second one, which is creating fear in the minds of mobile users. And this was a really interesting one to me. I tend to assume that because I know that mobile technology is actually more secure than desktop technology, that people would be less fearful about hackers on mobile than they are on desktop, but it's not true. What we see in mobile tests is that very often people will hesitate to do things that they would be happy to do on their desktop. They'll say, gee, maybe I've got to wait until I get back to my desktop before I do this. I'm not clear exactly why they're so fearful of hackers on mobiles. It may just be that the whole ecosystem feels more confusing to them. So they've got a handset company, they've got an OS vendor, they've got a mobile operator that they're dealing with, they've got application developers. And when something goes wrong, what happens? Those people all point at each other. And I think that's penetrated through to users, and they've gotten to the point where they're very, very uncomfortable now with what weird things might be happening on mobile. A second area of fear that we see is fear of accidentally opting in. So, gee, if I do this, what are the implications going to be on Facebook? This has reached the point where in the United States, the Federal Trade Commission, which is the main regulator of these sorts of things, is actually going around now to meetups of developers and warning them that they need to make the opt-ins and the opt-outs very, very clear within their applications. And they're also starting to sue companies for doing this. And I know how the FTC works. They don't start suing until they've gotten enormous numbers of customer complaints. So this is really a rising problem with people feeling insecure about opting in and opting out. And then the final one is the fear of automatic social posts. So this is different from opting in. This is, if I click on that thing, is somebody going to automatically post something to Facebook saying what I just did within that application? And we see this one coming up over and over and over again in our tests. And what's happened here is that there have been a few bad actors, a few companies that have done things where they took permissions that were granted on a mobile device, and then they've done very, very strongly antisocial things with those. And if you want to go look up the story about Path and the things that they did with sending text messages to somebody's entire phone book in the middle of the night, there have been lots of, actually not even lots of examples of this. There have just been just a few. But they got so heavily publicized that they scared everybody. So we're all paying the price for the mistakes that have been made by a small number of companies. So what we see in quotes is things like they'll say, well, I'm not going to like or dislike, or as soon as I'm done with this test, I'm going to go look on Facebook to see what kind of posting it did. Or even if something just sounds vaguely social, so we saw, for instance, an application that had something that was called social choices. People said, well, wait a minute, is that going to do some sort of social posting? What the function actually meant was this will tell you which things are the most popular. So it had nothing to do with social posts, but people still didn't want to click the button. The little screenshot that you see there is from an application that was done by an American manufacturer of bathroom tissue. It's a brand called Charmin. So this is toilet paper. And they did an application where people could rate the quality of public bathrooms. So, it uses GPS. You could go and take pictures of the bathroom if you wanted to, and you say, oh, this one's really clean, this one's really dirty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
sit or squat.
Sit or squat. Yep, that was and you can still go get this application, by the way.
Okay.
But in one of the versions of it, they put Facebook login there. So think what that would have done to the minds of the user. So you look at that and you're thinking, okay, if I click on that login, is it going to then tell everybody where I go to the bathroom? And so now for some users, we know Facebook users, right? For some of them, they would have said, hey, that's really neat. I'm good with that. But for other people, it's like, oh my goodness, this is terrifying. And the big thing is, it's not, I'm not saying don't use Facebook login. I'm not saying don't use social features. But you have to disclose to the users exactly what you're going to do with that connection. Or chances are, a lot of people won't click it, and you'll never even know why you're not getting good click-throughs. Another thing that we see is just need to generally secure personal information. So this is another one of the videos. I can't show you the video, but just talking about it. This is an application that was collecting your personal information. It was supposed to store things like your driver's license number and other things, credit card numbers, things like that. And the user simply refused to use the application because he was saying, you know what, I just don't know what's going to happen with this thing, and I'm not seeing any information here telling me how secure my information is going to be. So he refused to use the app. So what do? Well, one thing is you want to use what's called trust marks, and we've kind of forgotten about those. We had them back in the early days of the web. Those are those little badges that can appear on your application or on your website that say, this site has been evaluated by this third party to make sure that it's secure, and you don't have to worry about it. Those actually work well in mobile. If people see those, they're more likely to go ahead and use your stuff. Second one is you've got to display those opt-ins and opt-outs really, really clearly. Don't go hide them down because, oh, it's mobile and I have a smaller screen. You have to show those to people. And then give absolute clarity about what you're going to do with social information. So here's an example. This was the login from a mobile application called AnyDo. It's a to-do system. And under the Facebook sign-in, they wrote, your tasks will not be linked to your Facebook account in any way. It's pretty easy to do. That's not a hard thing to program, and that'll help you with this problem. So that's fear. Let me talk next about...
Mike,
sorry, go ahead.
You say that, for instance, just one line like that, in if you think about the test that you have done, that you performed, just one line where you discover exactly what you're going to do, even if it's just a simple line, is perceived as secure instead of not writing. My doubt is, are users reading, that line, and that line is so important, or users just skip, because you can write whatever you want. It's like when you write about privacy and say your privacy is safe, but then you never know what happened with your email. So what do you think?
There are always going to be some people who don't trust you no matter what, and that's unfortunate, but it's true. What I can tell you is that we think this helps. It makes it better. And since a lot of developers are looking for how can I move my conversion ratio from 2% to 3%, anything that you can do that helps ends up being a good thing. And so it's the sort of thing where we really strongly encourage companies, hey, test with it. It's easy to put this in. Test with it and see if it helps with the problem.
Got it. Right.
So let's now talk about confusion, which is one of the biggest areas where we see problems in mobile. There are all sorts of little mistakes that you can make going into mobile. One common one, believe it or not, is just that we will see text and images that are too small. And this is usually when somebody has an existing PC property, whether it's a website or an application, and they're trying to move it across to mobile, and they kind of squeeze stuff down a little bit, and they don't fully understand the implications of making the text really tiny. We also see companies that are mobile companies that are run by people who are about 21. And when you're that age, your vision up close is really, really good. And that's fine if your app is only going to be used by 21-year-olds. But you get people who start to get a little older, they lose their close-in vision. And it's a lot harder for them to read that tiny text. And so we see that one sometimes happening in our tests as well. Low contrast. So it's very trendy in the arts world today to do light gray text or light blue text on a white background, or to do dark gray text on a black background. And when people evaluate their mobile designs, they usually do it in a dark room where it looks okay. But mobile devices are used out in the sunlight. And when you get them out into the sun, the contrast goes down, and the text or the buttons may completely disappear from view. So you, in your development, you need to take the stuff outside and make sure that it looks okay outside. And you actually need higher contrast on mobile than you need on the desktop. And a lot of companies don't realize that. Another one we see is unusable design elements. So the sliders, like you see here, those little horizontal sliders for setting numbers are beautiful. It looks great on the screen. And it's actually just fine if you're choosing between like 0 and 5 and you just need a range between those things. But we saw one test that was from a ticket selling company where they were selling concert tickets, and you know how concert tickets are. At the low price end, you have something that's way up in the nosebleed seating where you're way far away from the stage, and maybe that's $50. And then you have the backstage pass with the band where you get to hang out with them and drink and take drugs and all that sort of stuff, and maybe that experience is $20,000. And we saw that ticket company put up a slider like this and then ask the user to pick a ticket that was priced at $75. And the problem is, here's the size of the human finger against that slider. So we see situations in tests where people are trying to figure out how to move their finger back and forth 1 pixel, or they tap repeatedly over and over again trying to get to the exact point. It makes people incredibly frustrated. There are other sort of spinner type things, moving lists of numbers that you can do in mobile that make it much easier for people to pick numbers. The problem is they're not as pretty as those sliders and they take up more space, so companies try to avoid using them. But my perspective is it's more important to make your thing usable than it is to make it beautiful, and you really want to use something that people can actually get the process done with. We see a lot of cryptic buttons in text where the icons don't make any sense to people, or words are used in a text, or pardon me, in an application that people don't understand the meaning. Slow response. When somebody taps a button in your application, it has to respond instantly. If it pauses even for half a second, the user is going to think that the app is frozen and they'll start pushing a bunch of other buttons at the same time, and your application either gets confused or it crashes. So even if it's just showing a little bit of animation when they tap the button, that's better than letting them guess that maybe your stuff is frozen. Lack of help. Because there aren't tooltips. Well, let me say, on the web, on the PC web, when people get stuck, the first thing they do is they look for tooltips. They move the mouse around, they hover it, and they see if they can get some instruction on what to do. Because tooltips don't exist on mobile, the first thing that we see users doing is they look for a help function. If there is a help function, they can usually answer their own question and they can get back on track. It's when there is no help function in a mobile website or app that we see people really, really getting lost and the users really go off into the weeds. So you got to have a help system. Often we'll see what we call just an unintuitive success path, which means the users look at your site or your app and they say, what am I supposed to do here? I don't really get it. It was clear to you as a developer, but it's not intuitively clear to the user, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to do testing before you release. And then we see this general trade-off between beauty and productivity, which I kind of hinted at earlier. What a lot of companies tend to do is they design their app to look beautiful, and then they try to figure out how to make it usable, and that's the wrong way to do it. Make it usable first, and then take that usable design and figure out how to make it look pretty. It may not be as absolutely gorgeous as what you would have liked to start with, but the ultimate form of beauty is an application that people can actually use. That's what you want to be shooting for.
Mike,
please go ahead.
When you talk about help,
yes,
it can be anything. I mean, it can be a text, a button, something that say, you need help, click here, or is something that works better than the other?
That's a great question, and actually hold that thought, because in about 2 slides I'll show you a picture of something that I think is great help. So thank you, that's wonderful. Let's talk though about icon confusion before we get to the help piece. So there are a couple of icons in mobile that are standard on all platforms. A magnifying glass means search. A question mark means help. But beyond that, you see Apple and Google trying to differentiate themselves by pushing different icon designs into the marketplace. And it gets even more confusing because those icons are starting to float into other platforms and other places. So this is, for instance, an example of some of the things that have different conflicting designs on the different platforms, and in some cases they have very similar icons that mean different things. What we're finding in tests is that it's kind of like a situation if every road sign on the road had a different icon on it to mean the same things. The icons start to cancel each other out, and they don't mean anything at all. We're starting to see situations also in which certain gestures and swipes, because they do different things on different platforms, are starting to mean nothing to anybody at all. And so it's actually usability in some cases is going down because of all this confusion. And so an example of what's happening, this is a picture of Google's little doodle that they did for last Valentine's Day. And on the left-hand side, those three dots with the lines connecting between them, that's the share icon from Android. The share icon on iOS is completely different. So what do you think happens is if an iOS user accesses this particular web page on an iOS device? What's going to go on? And notice there's no text label. There's nothing to tell them what that means. That's the sort of crosstalk and confusion that we're starting to see more and more frequently. So what's an example of the sort of stuff that goes on? So this is another video that I would show you if I could, but I can talk you through it a little bit. This is a photo sharing application that was tested through our service. It was still in development. And basically the user can tap in order to import photos. But the application didn't give any feedback on the number of photos that you were going to import or any warning about what you were doing, and it didn't give a progress bar to tell you what was going on. So the user went and tapped, ended up accidentally trying to import their entire photo archive from their mobile device up to a server on the web. So that's more than 400 photos that they were waiting to upload. And then it looked like the application wasn't doing anything. And the user started pushing button after button after button, trying to figure out what was going on. If you were just looking at the server log for that application, all you'd see is a whole bunch of button presses. You'd say, well, this user went crazy. It must have been an idiot user. The actual problem was that the application was not giving proper feedback. It wasn't warning them properly, and it wasn't showing response when a button was first pressed. And as a result, you got this whole tap storm that was going on, but the developer wouldn't have realized it without running the tests. So what do you want to do? Well, first of all, it's a change in design philosophy. When you're doing mobile, you want to think to yourself that functionality is the highest form of beauty. Make it work first and then make it pretty. Second, avoid confusing user interface elements. Do not assume that people will understand what those beautiful icons mean, because in many cases we see that they don't. If you have any doubt at all, put text underneath the icons. I know it's not as pretty, but it will make people understand your application better. Avoid using multi-level menus. We see people getting completely stuck in multi-level menu systems all the time. They just get very, very confusing. Respond instantly. You know, even if you've got some network latency and it's going to take three seconds to get an answer, put up some weird spastic animation on the screen so it makes it look like your application has responded and it's really busy. We used to do that at Palm all the time, because what we found was if the application looks busy, it feels to the user like time is passing faster. So you've not only acknowledged that they pressed the button, but you also are making it feel to them like things are moving along at a better pace. So there's some things you can do to make them feel better about your app. And then you want great help. Ideally, it should be context sensitive, it should be searchable, it should be always available. But let me show you a couple of examples of simple things that people can do. So here's the WebMD application. It's a good one to look at. Pretty complex app. On the left-hand side, when you first install it, they bring up this little dialog box that says, hey, you can take a tour of the application if you want to. You tap on that, and it takes you through the main screens of the application. So that's what you see on the right. And what they've done is they've taken all the information that they normally would have put in tooltips, and they just made it into static images. So what you see on the right is just an image. It's not tappable. All you can do is swipe it to go to the next one. But it's giving you the same information that you would have gotten out of tooltips. This is really easy to program. If you make this sort of thing available at the start of the app, and you also let people re-enter it from any time in your application, you've actually gotten them 9/10 of the way to where they need to go in terms of help. Another good example. So this is an application called Snapseed. It's a photo editing application, and this is, if you look at it on the left, this is a very typical mobile app in the sense that you've got these cryptic things like, what does that star do? And what am I supposed to do with this photo? And how exactly do I get anything done? The saving grace of this application is the little question mark that you see on the upper left-hand corner. You tap on that and watch what happens. The screen kind of dims, and they bring up in white instructions on what the various icons do. So now we've gone from an application that is kind of interesting looking, but is almost unusable, to a situation where the user can immediately figure out what it is that they're supposed to be doing with things. So this is a great way to do it. And again, this is super simple to program. This is just some simple graphical overlays that you display over the screens. And this is almost something I could write. It's that simple. And so it doesn't have to be a super sophisticated help system. There's stuff you can do to help people get oriented pretty easily.
By the way, Mike, having four kids, what I notice is, and having my phone installed games for kids, so I'm black belt of games for 5 years old guys. But the interesting thing that I notice that is exactly what you're talking about here is that when they have to describe how a game is working,
Yes.
obviously you can't explain to a 5-old year five-old boy how it works a game. It has to be
Yep.
super simple, and most of the app they works exactly like the last one. So it's a very simple image that show what you have to do with your finger. That's it, and
Yep.
everyone can use it, and it
Yep.
works great, and it's absolutely easy to use it. By the way, Mike, we have
Yeah.
Julian chat. You probably already answered, but I give you back the question again.
Sure.
She said, same question. On our apps, the help option is a button that sends an email to the app team. Is that okay?
Okay. Um, it depends on whether you're okay with having your users stay frustrated until you can send an email back to them. So it's going to depend entirely on the application. If you think they're dedicated enough that they'll wait a day for you to respond, that can be okay. If you feel, the problem with applications, mobile apps, is people are very impatient, and we see this in the test. They've got a very short attention span, and once they go out of your application, if they're not feeling really intrigued by it, they may never come back. So my recommendation would be to try to have some help that would let them help themselves, and also give them a button that lets them send you an email. But the button for the email should be feedback or ask a question or something like that, so that they understand. It's really two types of interaction. Here's how we'll try to help you right now, and if you're stuck, then please send us an email, and we'll do our best to be able to resolve it. So I love it. I absolutely love it that you have a button for people giving feedback and being able to contact you within the application. That's marvelous. Depending on your app, though, it may not be enough.
Right.
That's without seeing the application, that's kind of my personal opinion.
And also Miguel in chat, he's right. He says all that we're talking about lies on the very basic concept of design, function before shape, better functional than beautiful.
Yep, I totally agree. Good. Okay, we're making progress. So let's talk about the fourth trap, which is making your users bored. So I apologize. There's this television show called Sesame Street in the United States. I don't know how well it's known around the world, but basically it's a children's entertainment show that's very good at holding the attention of small kids, and it's a great metaphor for what you need to do in mobile applications. Doing a mobile app or a mobile website is kind of like planning a birthday party for a room full of 4-year-olds. And they're very easily bored. They're very, very restless. They will move on to something else that you don't want them to move around to. Now, sometimes companies hear this and they think, oh, what I have to do is I have to gamify my application. I've got to turn it into this tremendously entertaining thing with a lot of flashing lights and other things like that. That's not it. Definitely, if you're doing a game, you should make it entertaining or challenging or whatever you're after with that game as soon as possible. But if you're doing a productivity application, don't trivialize it by making it look like a game. Just let people make progress and become productive very, very quickly. The sooner you can start giving them rewards, the sooner they're going to get really excited about working with your stuff, and the sooner they're going to start becoming loyal. So it's allow them to make progress against something as quickly as possible. That's really the key to avoiding boredom. The top turnoffs, they'll just kind of wonder what's the point. Maybe it's too hard to learn. Too many social prompts. So this is different from what I said previously. This is not log in via Facebook. This is, hey, do you want to share this with your friends? Hey, do you want to share this with your friends? The first one or maybe 2 times, that's kind of like, okay. But beyond that, if you keep nagging them about it, people will get turned off really, really quickly. Too many controls or too few controls to where people get confused, and you're stuck on this, right? You can't win. So you've got to be really, really careful to understand your main user, your mainstream user. What are the functions they want to do, and how do I put those functions up front? And maybe the rest of the functions that are for the power users, we hide them someplace. Or there are situations where we see apps that are just plain boring to people. And so the video that I would have shown you here is this app, which is a slot machine simulator, where the users just couldn't quite figure out what it is they're supposed to be accomplishing with this. And the fun thing in the user tests is you don't even have to understand the language that the users are talking in. You just listen to tone of voice, and you listen for certain cues. Like, for instance, if a user does this during the test, if they go, you hear this big long sigh, that means you are in deep trouble.
That's not good, Mike.
Yeah,
I
really, really
heard it
not.
a lot with my website, but okay.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry to say, but hey, you found out because you might not have even known otherwise, and so it's really, really good to be able to get this feedback. So, um, what we see in a lot of cases is that companies will be enter mobile using the design paradigm that they have in web apps for the computer. So I'm sure you've heard this phrase, is people will say you should ship an embarrassingly primitive version of your app as early as possible, and then what you do is you get feedback. You look at the analytics, you say, where do we lose people? You make some guesses at why that's happening, you build a fix, and then you've got a slightly less embarrassing person, and you just run through that cycle as quickly as you possibly can, and eventually you evolve a really good site. And that actually works okay in the web. It is often a disaster in mobile. And here's what happens. You ship an embarrassingly primitive version of your application. You get completely trashed in the App Store. You then go back desperately and try to fix it. But by then you've gotten a whole bunch of bad reviews. And also the people who are most interested in doing an early trial with your application have tried it and they're disillusioned and they're not going to come back. And so you struggle. You never really manage to recover in the App Store in a lot of cases. And then we see companies that will say, well, we've just determined that mobile is not a good match for our business process. And they go back to focusing on their PC stuff. And that's not what really happened. What really happened was you screwed up and you don't realize, and now you're repeating back and focusing on doing what's comfortable to you without doing the hard work that you need to do to really fix what you've done in mobile. So having that website development paradigm in your head is actually an extremely dangerous thing to do. What you want to actually do is do heavy testing before you release, so you flip around the entire process. So it's kind of two things. First of all, you don't want to just test for usability. You want to also test for emotional engagement. Are people sighing? Do they sound energized when they're doing the tests with this stuff? So it requires a mix of analytics plus the sort of qualitative research that you can do with user testing. So not to turn this into a commercial, there are other companies that do this sort of testing as well. But you want to be seeing both user tests from people who have fresh eyes, who are not your best friends, who will be honest with you. And you also need the analytics together, and you need to look at both of those. And then you need to do testing throughout the development process from the prototype stage and do it all the way through development before you ship so you don't get trashed in the App Store. It doesn't have to be big scale testing. You could test on just 3 or 4 users. It's better to do tiny tests at multiple times during development so you can fix the problems rather than doing a big test at the end when it's going to be too late to fix most of the problems that you might find. So gradual, continuous testing in small numbers throughout the development process is the right way to do it for mobile. So I talked about the 4 traps. Let's talk about how to avoid them.
Just before this,
please.
Another question from Cheska or Seska from Spain.
Yep.
Hola, Cheska. Where she's Cheska? All right. What's the acceptable level of waiting time that users find okay? You were speaking before about the fact that when you click, something has to happen. Did you find out any kind of waiting time, average waiting time that is acceptable or not acceptable?
Even as little as a quarter of a second. Anything that's perceptible makes people start to feel like maybe there's something wrong with the application. So what I usually recommend is the button should immediately highlight as soon as it's pressed. Within about a second, if it's going to take longer than a second, show some additional animation that shows that you're working on it. It could be the little standard spinner that you throw up. It could be something else. One of the little tricks that some developers have told me is you want to find something that makes it look like the network is being slow rather than your application is slow. So if you're gonna take any do any sort of text saying what's going on, say waiting for network response rather than working on your request. But basically, you want them to feel like the application responds to them immediately. And then if things are slow, it's because the network is doing something bad, because people understand that the network can be slow. They'll be accepting of that. They're not accepting of an application that looks slow.
And so Angry Birds Go has got this message always. The network, we're trying to connect to the network, and I often think, well, will be the network or will be the app? That is a smart way to give the right perception to the user about your app.
Yep. Yep. Well, and you look at some applications that are heavily network dependent. Like I play a little bit of Boom Beach, if you're familiar with that one. And that's a heavily networked app. Anytime it does something, it has to check in with the network. They hide a lot of that network contact in the background, and then sometimes when you have to sit through network stuff, what they will do is they show various levels of animation, like zooming through clouds and other things like that, and that is all just non-functional frou-frou that they're using to hide the fact that they're contacting the network. And so it's good to study some of those successful applications and see the little tricks that they use. This is the point in the presentation now, talking about what to do, where I would, if we had videos, I'd show you the whole promotional video that shows the guys at Evernote talking about what they do with user testing. You're lucky in this case that you can't see the videos, so you don't have to sit through that. The point that Evernote makes in this is their head of development, Phil Constantino, who talks about this stuff, is that he doesn't use these tests just to test usability things. The real benefit, which I agree with, is getting inside the mind of your user. When you hear them talking about things, when you understand the emotional reactions that they have and the way they talk about the decisions that they make, you can start to anticipate problems that they're going to have. And that's where you really want to get to it as a designer. It's not, oh, we're responding to this test. It is, we understand the users so well that we can design for them right and the first time, and 80% of the time we're going to get it right. That's when a development team can really, really move fast. So I encourage you to use tests not just to test usability, but structure the tests so you can learn how your customers think and you can start anticipating their needs. So what do I want you to remember about all of this stuff? First of all, you want to rethink your application or website for mobile. Don't just port it across. Second, design for the mainstream 80% of your users. If you need to put in things for the power users, you can hide them a couple levels down. Next, when in doubt between a graphic and a text, use text. It's not as pretty, but you'll have better usability. Fourth, avoid multi-level menus. Especially, please try not to go below 2 levels of menus. Next, make it work and then figure out how to make it pretty. Next, respond instantly, even if it's just some empty animation to let people know that the application is still working and it hasn't frozen. Give people superb help. And again, it doesn't have to be ultra complex. It just needs to be available all the time. Show them that they're safe, so give them those trust marks. Avoid creating social anxiety. If you ask them to do a social login or to share something socially, tell them exactly what you're going to do with that information. And then finally, rather than ship early, ship often, which is what people say in the web world, you want to test early and test often. Okay, so with that, I'll stop talking at you. Here's a code to do a free test if you want to on user testing. So you go to our site at checkout, you use that code, and that'll give you one free test. There's a white paper about this stuff, so there's the place where you can get to the white paper. And then there's my email address, which is mike@usertesting.com. It's real easy to remember. If you have comments, if you have questions, if you have feedback, if you disagree with some of this stuff and want to argue with me, I would absolutely love to hear from you. So please don't be a stranger.
Mike, you were fantastic, and I'm happy that we got some questions during the presentation. Not to interrupt you, but just to get clarification during the presentation, and was very helpful. I would say that one takeaway for me from your presentation today is the importance of having a dedicated mobile person in your company. If you are a big company, probably you'll have a team. But if you are a small, medium-sized company, just find someone, put him in charge of your mobile strategy, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. So that's one very important thing. And also, everyone, I mean, in the geek digital community, we talk about, lean startup, Eric Ries, minimum viable product, deliver as soon as you can, and then you will fix it. But I really like the fact that you say, no, you have to test it very good, because on mobile is a different way of reacting to crappy apps. Then that's true.
Yep. What you want is a minimum kick butt application, a minimum utterly desirable application. Doesn't mean you have to put in every feature that you thought of into version 1, but you got to do something that's utterly compelling, and you have to nail that when you start, or you may never recover.
Okay. There is Miguel in chat. He's writing something interesting. He said,
Uh-huh.
I'm the very example of do as I said, not as I did. My site only resizes to the screen window, but I have an
Mhm.
excuse. I always do. As a presentations designer and PowerPoint lover, my site was all made with PowerPoint and then
Mhm.
converted to HTML5.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's,
Yep.
that's
It's hard, and that's the awful thing is that in a lot of cases the what feels like it's going to be the easiest path is not the one that works the best. But at least you're aware of it. I mean, that's the big thing. If you understand the trade-offs and you don't have unrealistic expectations, then at least you know what's going on, and maybe you can find ways to over time gradually convert pages, stuff like that.
one question, Mike. Everyone say now mobile first, and obviously we
Yeah.
here doing mobile strategy, so we are kind of convinced about the fact that mobile obviously is huge and is pervasive and so on. But from a very practical point of view, I would like your feedback about this point. You do tons of testing on usertesting.com, tons of testing both on PC world and mobile.
Yeah.
What's the weight there? I mean, do you see clearly a trend that bring all the companies testing mobile? They still not testing mobile and they test only their website. How does it work? I mean, you are in the
Yeah.
middle of the data. I'd like
Yeah.
your feedback about that.
It's actually shocking how many companies are not doing much mobile testing, and I don't fully understand why. I think in some cases they just figure, well, it's not a majority of our traffic today, and so we should focus on the things that's the majority of our traffic. In some cases, they've hired the large companies. They will have hired a consulting firm to do their mobile stuff, so it's not actually in-house. And as a result, it's just whatever that consulting firm feels like doing. Um, what we're encouraging companies to do, and what I think the leading edge ones are starting to do, kind of some of the leading edge design work in mobile is actually being done by commerce companies because they depend on conversion rates and stuff like that, and they're working
Right.
very hard on it. And they're starting to think not in terms of mobile alone, what do I do, but how does mobile interact with what I'm doing on the desktop? And if they have bricks and mortar, if they have real stores, they're also thinking about mobile plus desktop plus tablet. So it's smartphone, tablet, desktop, and store. And how do all those things interact together to make somebody purchase? And that's really tricky because our analytics systems are not set up to track customers across all those different places. But the leading edge stuff that I'm seeing right now is things like mobile assisted shopping, where a company will say, okay, I accept that people are going to have mobile phones, smartphones when they're in my store, and I'm going to take advantage of that to give them all sorts of product information that they can easily get to. If you want to look out even further, watch what Amazon is doing with the Fire Phone, where they built this thing called Firefly into it, which is basically you take a picture of anything with the phone and it immediately tells you how you can order it. What they're doing with that is they're trying to take shopping away from the online store. They're saying, okay, let me take mobile and I'm going to figure out how to turn the device itself into the store. And we won't even have somebody log into a website to order something. If you think about that sort of massive paradigm change in how people use stuff,
Right.
that's really
Right.
scary. If you're running an e-commerce site, what if the future of e-commerce is it's not e-commerce anymore? It's just the usage of the device. That's where I think the really big earthquake, the extinction event that I talked about at the start, that's where those things are still lingering in mobile. And that is so outside of the way that most of us, including myself, are thinking today, that it's really kind of spooky. So I apologize. You asked a very straightforward question, and I gave you a long, rambling answer
No,
to it.
but it's
But
interesting. And tell us
that's
again
what's
the
going
name
on.
of this app.
It's called Firefly,
Firefly.
Firefly, and it is and they've experimented around with this with some of their mobile apps, but what they're doing on the Fire phone is they're building it in with a dedicated button. So you touch this button, and whatever you're pointing the camera at, it's going to search on the Amazon store, and it's going to tell you, here's the availability, here's the price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it does shape
Cool.
recognition on the thing that you photograph.
Great. Mike, final question from
Yeah.
Moda. How
Mm,
important social features are for mobile app? I mean, in case
yeah.
of a gaming app, How is
Yep.
important to have a Facebook or Twitter link, or at least a chat? In case of a chat, can this sufficiently replace a Facebook Twitter link? So yeah,
Oh, okay.
the point of social, I think, is interesting for many people.
Yeah.
How much
Yeah.
social stuff you should put into your mobile app.
So I think it can be extremely important, and this is one of those ones where you want to understand your users, because different people want different levels of social interaction. And if you're shooting for users who are very intensely social, then yeah, having all the social stuff there is critical. If you're not, if you're shooting for a broader target, then what you probably want to do is just make sure that the social things are optional. Don't force them to share in order to use your stuff, because what you'll get is some people who really like to share and some people who don't. But it's all a matter of targeting. You know, the sharing stuff is just another tool. It's obviously very powerful. It's a great way to discover users, but just understand your users and what level of comfort they have, and give them the opt-outs. That's my general recommendation. Is social stuff is fine as long as you give people the opt-outs.
Great. Mike, we finished our time, absolutely in time, and you were really super useful, and I really appreciate all your time and your patience to explain all the fears and all the things to do, and I think it was a session that really added value to our friends in chat. So congratulations for you from the chat, but I will let you be in touch directly on Twitter with our users. And Michael, what can I say? We just keep in touch, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun, and thank you everybody for signing in for it.
Thank you so much, Mike. And with all the people now in chat and watching this video, we just will be back tomorrow and all this week with SME's mobile strategies powered by Apps Builder. And here was Marco Montemagno. Very happy to be here with you, and see you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.